My father canceled my birthday to fund my entitled brother's trip. Stop crying. Not a big deal, they said. I've never been the type to ask for much. Growing up in a household where money discussions always ended in hushed arguments behind closed doors taught me to keep my wants small and my expectations smaller. But this year was different. This year I was turning 16, and for once I allowed myself to dream a little bigger. Not extravagant, mind you. All I wanted was a small gathering with my 4 closest friends. Just us, a homemade chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, and maybe those watercolor paints I'd been eyeing at the art store for months. The ones with 36 colors that came in a wooden box. They were $24.99, and I'd saved up half myself. For 3 months, I dropped hints. Casual mentions about how nice it would be to have a little get-together just once. I even left the art store catalog open to the watercolor page, a small star drawn next to the price tag. Mom had seemed receptive, nodding with that tired smile of hers. "We'll see, honey," she'd said, and for once, it didn't sound like the usual brush-off. I should have known better. Exactly 1 week before my birthday, I walked into the kitchen to find Dad at the table, scrolling through his phone with that detached look he reserved for conversations he didn't want to have. Mom stood by the sink, her back to him, shoulders rigid. "Hey," I said, immediately sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" Dad barely looked up. "Olivia, good timing. We need to talk about your birthday." "Yeah." I tried to keep my voice neutral. "We're going to have to cancel any plans this year," he said casually. "Budget's tight right now." The flutter in my stomach curdled into something heavy and cold. Cancel? But I wasn't asking for much. Just a few friends over, and maybe a cake. Dad sighed with impatience. "Olivia, when I say we don't have the budget, I mean we don't have the budget. Even small gatherings cost money." "I could pay for some of it myself," I offered quickly. "I have $40 saved up from helping Mrs. Jenkins with her garden." The look Dad gave me was one I'd seen 1,000 times, part pity, part annoyance, as if my suggestions were always burdensome. "That's not the point," he said. "The point is, we have more important expenses right now." Before I could ask what could possibly be more important, the front door slammed, and my brother Ryan's voice echoed through the house.
"Dad."
"Dad, did you talk to them yet?" His footsteps thundered down the hallway, and he appeared in the doorway, all 6 feet of him vibrating with excitement. At 19, Ryan was everything I wasn't. Loud where I was quiet, demanding where I was accommodating, and somehow, always the center of my parents' universe. He played football, not well enough for a scholarship, but well enough to be popular. He got average grades with minimal effort, and everyone, especially Dad, thought he hung the moon. Dad's face transformed at the sight of him, annoyance melting into indulgent affection. "Not yet, bud." Was just about to make the call. Ryan noticed me then, his grin faltering slightly. "Oh, hey Squirt." I hated that nickname. I wasn't 8 anymore. "What call?" I asked, looking between them. Dad and Ryan exchanged a glance, a silent communication that excluded me completely. "Ryan's going on a trip with his friends after graduation," Dad finally explained. "To that beach resort in Florida they've been talking about." My mouth went dry. "A trip? To Florida?" Ryan rolled his eyes. "It's not just any trip, Liv. It's like the trip. Everyone from the team is going. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing before we all head off to college." I stared at Dad, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. "So that's the more important expense?" Ryan's beach vacation. Dad's expression hardened. "Watch your tone." "But that's not fair. You just told me we couldn't afford my birthday, but you're sending him to Florida?" My voice cracked embarrassingly. "Life isn't fair, Olivia," Dad snapped. "Ryan's graduating. This is important for him. Your birthday happens every year." "So does his." I shot back, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "And he always gets exactly what he wants. Last year, it was that gaming computer. The year before?" "That's enough." Dad stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Ryan has worked hard. He deserves this trip with his friends before college. You're being selfish." "I was being selfish?" The unfairness hit me like a physical blow. Ryan hadn't worked hard for anything in his life. His mediocre grades were celebrated like achievements, while my honor roll status was met with distracted nods. And as for college, Ryan had only applied to state schools with high acceptance rates, while I had been researching scholarships since freshman year, knowing I'd be on my own when the time came. Tears pricked at my eyes, and I hated myself for them. "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. "Whatever." "Don't be like that," Ryan said, sounding annoyed with me. "It's just a stupid birthday." I looked at Mom, silently pleading for her to say something, to defend me just this once. She met my gaze briefly, apologetically, before looking away. As always, she wouldn't take sides against Dad. "I need to call Ralph about the payment," Dad said, already pulling out his phone. "They're holding Ryan's spot until tomorrow." "How much is this trip?" I asked, unable to help myself. Dad waved dismissively. "That's none of your concern." But Ryan, never one for subtlety, puffed out his chest proudly. "It's the premium package. 6 nights, all-inclusive. The works." All-inclusive. The works. I felt sick. "I can't believe this," I whispered. Dad's patience finally snapped. "For God's sake, Olivia, stop crying. It's not a big deal. It's just a birthday." Just a birthday. My birthday. The one day a year I foolishly thought might be about me. I turned and fled to my room, ignoring Ryan's shout of "drama queen" that followed me up the stairs. I slammed my door, collapsed onto my bed, and let the tears come freely. Through the thin walls, I could hear Dad on the phone, his voice animated and jovial as he arranged payment for Ryan's trip. In that moment, I understood a truth that had been hovering at the edges of my awareness for years. I had never mattered as much as Ryan, and I probably never would. 2 months after my canceled birthday, I was trying to move on. I'd stopped bringing it up, tired of Dad's eye-rolling and Ryan's smug comments about his epic Florida trip. The photos plastered all over his social media were torture enough. Ryan and his friends on jet skis, at beach parties, lounging at the resort's infinity pool. Each post captioned with some variation of "best vacation ever" or "living the dream." Meanwhile, I was picking up extra hours at my weekend job at the library. Not because I enjoyed shelving books in the stuffy back room, but because college wasn't going to pay for itself. Unlike Ryan, who seemed to think money appeared magically in his bank account. "You're so responsible," Mrs. Chun, the head librarian, had told me that afternoon as I counted my meager earnings. "Most teenagers wouldn't be saving for college at your age." I wanted to tell her it wasn't responsibility, it was necessity. But I just smiled and tucked the money into my wallet next to the college fund tracker I kept there. Every dollar counted. When I got home, the house was quiet. Dad was working late, and Ryan was out with friends, as usual. Only Mom was home, sitting at the dining room table surrounded by papers. "Hey, Mom," I said, dropping my backpack by the door. "What's all that?" She looked up, tired lines around her eyes more pronounced than usual. "Just trying to organize some old paperwork. Your father's idea of filing is shoving everything in a drawer until tax season." I laughed, a rare moment of lightness between us. Since my birthday incident, Mom had been walking on eggshells, guilty, I suspected, for not standing up for me, but unwilling to challenge Dad's decisions. "Want some help?" I offered, partly out of kindness, partly to spend time with her without Dad or Ryan around. "That would be nice," she said with a grateful smile. "Could you sort these into piles? Bank statements, medical bills, insurance." I nodded and took a seat beside her, reaching for a stack of papers. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the shuffling of papers and occasional sigh from Mom as she discovered something forgotten or unfiled. I was halfway through my pile when a document caught my eye. It was a bank statement, but what made me pause was the name on it. Trevor Wilson, custodian for Olivia Wilson. My name. "Mom." I held up the paper, confused. "What's this account? It has my name on it." Mom glanced over, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Oh, that's your college fund. Your grandparents started it when you were born." I have a college fund? This was news to me. Dad had always made it clear that my college would be my responsibility, unlike Ryan's, which they were handling. Yes, Mom said, sounding slightly uncomfortable now. Your grandparents set it up with a small amount, and we've added to it over the years. Not much, but something. My heart quickened. A college fund. Money specifically for my education. A weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying suddenly lifted from my shoulders. Can I see it? I asked, excitement building. Maybe I wouldn't have to work every weekend after all. Maybe I could actually afford a decent school without drowning in debt. Mom hesitated, but then nodded. Sure, it's all there in that folder. I pulled the folder toward me, opening it with trembling fingers. Inside were years of bank statements, all neatly arranged by date. I started with the most recent and worked backward. The first statement showed a balance of $3,246.09. Not a fortune, but more than I had saved on my own. I felt a surge of gratitude toward my grandparents, even as I wondered why no one had mentioned this fund to me before. Then I looked at the previous statement. Balance, $11,837.22. I blinked, sure I'd read it wrong. I looked again. No, that was the number. Over $11,000, just 3 months ago. Now barely $3,000. Mom, my voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. Why is there $8,000 missing from this account? Mom's head snapped up, her face draining of color. What? I showed her the statements, pointing to the figures. Look, 3 months ago there was almost $12,000. Now, there's only $3,000. She took the papers from me, examining them with increasing distress. That can't be right. But as she flipped through the statements, her expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. Each statement showed large withdrawals, $2, $500 here, $3,000 there, all within the last few months. I don't understand, she whispered. Your father never mentioned withdrawing from this account. But I understood. The dates of the withdrawals lined up perfectly. One large withdrawal a week before Ryan's Florida trip. Another around the time he got that new gaming laptop he needed for school. A third coinciding with the designer clothes he'd been showing off lately. My college fund had been systematically drained to fund Ryan's lifestyle. The room seemed to tilt as rage and betrayal washed over me in alternating waves. Dad hadn't just canceled my birthday, he'd stolen my future. Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. These withdrawals. They match up with Ryan's expenses, don't they? Mom's silence was answer enough. She looked away, shame written across her face. Did you know? I asked, needing to hear it. She shook her head quickly. No. I had no idea he was taking from your college fund. He said he'd moved some investments around. Investments? That's what I was to him, a resource to be tapped whenever golden boy Ryan needed something shiny. I gathered the statements, my hands shaking with a mix of fury and determination. I'm going to talk to Dad about this. Olivia, wait. Mom reached for my arm. Let me talk to him first. He'll just what, Mom? Dismiss me? Tell me to stop being dramatic? This is MY money. I clutched the papers to my chest. My future. The front door slammed, followed by Dad's voice calling out that he was home. Mom and I locked eyes, a silent communication passing between us. For once, I wouldn't back down. For once, I wouldn't be invisible. I stood, papers in hand, ready to confront the man who had always seen me as an afterthought. It was time for my father to explain why his son's vacation was worth more than his daughter's education. My heart pounded against my ribs as I marched down the hallway toward the kitchen, the bank statements clutched tightly in my fist. Mom followed a few steps behind, her worried whispers falling on deaf ears. For once in my life, I didn't care about keeping the peace. Dad was rummaging through the refrigerator, his back to me. The casual normalcy of the scene, him looking for leftovers as if he hadn't pillaged my future, made my blood boil. We need to talk, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. He turned, a container of yesterday's pasta in hand, eyes narrowing at my tone. What's with you? I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped forward and slammed the bank statements onto the kitchen table, spreading them out like a dealer laying cards. What is this? I demanded, finger jabbing at the withdrawal amounts highlighted in angry red circles I'd drawn while walking down the hall. Dad barely glanced at the papers, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance to something harder to read. He set down the pasta container and crossed his arms. Where did you get those? He asked instead of answering my question. Mom and I were organizing paperwork. I refused to be deflected. $8,000, Dad. Nearly $8,000 withdrawn from MY College Fund in the last 3 months. Care to explain? From the corner of my eye, I saw Mom hovering in the doorway, her fingers twisting nervously. Dad shot her an accusatory look before turning back to me. Those are financial documents you had no business looking at, he said, voice dangerously level. They have my name on them. I countered. It's my college fund. Dad scoffed, the sound like a slap. You're a minor, Olivia. That money is legally under my control. That doesn't make it yours to spend. I raised you, didn't I? He straightened, towering over me, his voice hardening. Put a roof over your head, clothes on your back, food on the table. You think that's free? That money is mine to use as I see fit. The casual dismissal, the absolute lack of remorse, it struck me speechless for a moment. I'd expected denials, excuses, maybe even begrudging apologies. Not this unapologetic claim to my future. You. I struggled to find words through my shock. You stole from me. Dad's eyes flashed. Don't be dramatic. I made a financial decision for this family. For Ryan, you mean? The pieces were aligning with sickening clarity. All those withdrawals line up perfectly with his expenses. His trip, his laptop, his... Ryan needed him more, Dad interrupted with an indifferent shrug. He's at a crucial point in his life. And I'm not. My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. What about college? What about MY future? You'll be fine, he waved dismissively. You've always been the responsible one. You'll figure it out. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. My responsibility, the very trait that should have earned me support, was being used as justification to abandon me financially. So that's it? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping. Ryan gets everything handed to him because he's irresponsible, and I get nothing because I'm the responsible one? Stop being so melodramatic. Dad rolled his eyes, reaching for the pasta again, as if the conversation was already over. It's just money. You can get scholarships, loans if you need to. Just money, I echoed, incredulous. It's not just money, it's trust. It's fairness. It's knowing your parents have your back. Dad slammed the container down. Enough. You don't get to question my decisions. I do what's best for this family. Best for Ryan, you mean? I corrected, tears stinging my eyes despite my determination not to cry. It's always been Ryan first, hasn't it? His wants, his needs, his future. Ryan has potential, Dad began, but I cut him off. And I don't. The words ripped from my throat, raw with years of accumulated hurt. I'm top of my class. I've worked every weekend since I was 15. I've never been in trouble, never asked for anything extravagant, and you still... My voice broke. You still think I'm worth less than him. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Mom had moved to the table, hand covering her mouth, eyes darting between Dad and me. If you don't drop this attitude, Dad finally said, voice low with warning, I won't help you with anything ever again. Not a dime for college, not co-signing any loans. Nothing. I looked at him, then really looked at him. At the man who had packed Ryan's suitcase for his Florida trip while telling me birthdays weren't important. Who signed away my education fund without a second thought. Who stood before me now, threatening to withhold support he had already decided never to give. And I realized something chilling. He had never intended to help me in the first place. You can't withhold what you never planned to give, I said quietly, a strange calm settling over me. You were never going to help me, were you? Even before you emptied my account. Something flickered across Dad's face. Guilt, perhaps, or simply irritation at being called out. He didn't deny it. Well, I pressed, needing to hear him say it. College isn't for everyone, he finally muttered, not meeting my eyes. Ryan needs the support more. He's not as academically inclined as you. Translation: Ryan would fail without help, while I might succeed despite the lack of it. Another punishment for my capability. You know what the worst part is? I gathered the bank statements, hands steady despite the storm inside me. It's not even that you took the money. It's that you're not even sorry. Dad's jaw clenched. I did what I had to do. For Ryan, I finished for him. Not for me. Never for me. I backed away from the table. Documents clutched to my chest, a plan already forming in my mind. If Dad thought this conversation was over, he was wrong. If he thought I would quietly accept this betrayal, he didn't know me at all. This isn't over, I said, the quiet determination in my voice making Mom look up in surprise. Dad snorted. Yes, it is. And if you breathe a word of this to anyone, especially your grandparents. You'll what? I challenged, no longer afraid of his threats. Take more money I don't have? Care about me even less than you already do? There's nothing left for you to take from me. With that, I turned and walked away, ignoring his calls to come back, ignoring Mom's tearful pleas for calm. I had evidence in my hands and fire in my veins. My father had made his choice. Now I would make mine. My room had always been my sanctuary, the one place where I could escape the blatant favoritism that defined our family. Now it felt like a war room. I had taped the bank statements to my wall, a visual reminder of my father's betrayal that fueled my resolve every time I looked at them. 3 days had passed since the kitchen confrontation. 3 days of tense silence, of Dad acting as if nothing had happened, of Ryan blissfully unaware that his luxuries had come at my expense. 3 days of Mom's worried glances and whispered concerns about tearing the family apart. As if the family wasn't already torn, split down the middle between the golden child and the afterthought. A soft knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. Olivia? Mom's voice. Tentative. Can I come in? I sighed, removing the chair I'd started propping against my doorknob at night. It's open. She entered, eyes immediately drawn to the financial documents plastered across my wall. Her lips thinned, but she didn't comment on my makeshift evidence board. Your father wants us all to have dinner together tonight, she said instead, perching carefully on the edge of my bed. He thinks we should move past this disagreement. Disagreement. I echoed, incredulous. Is that what he's calling theft now? Mom winced. Olivia.
No, Mom. Don't do that.
Don't minimize this. I gestured to the wall of proof. He stole my future and gave it to Ryan. That's not a disagreement. That's a crime. She didn't deny it, which surprised me. Instead, she stared at the statements, the withdrawal dates, the steadily decreasing balance that represented my vanishing opportunities. I didn't know, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. About the money. I swear, I didn't know he was taking from your college fund. I wanted to believe her. The way her hands trembled, how her eyes couldn't meet mine, it seemed genuine. But she'd stood silent through years of Dad's favoritism, through countless moments when Ryan got everything and I got whatever was left. But you knew about everything else, I said quietly. You knew it wasn't fair. A tear slipped down her cheek. I did. Your father can be very convincing when he wants to be, and very difficult when challenged. That I knew all too well. He says Ryan needed more support, she continued, twisting her wedding ring nervously. That you were stronger, more capable of standing on your own. So, I'm being punished for not being a screw-up? The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Great parenting strategy. Mom looked up then, something shifting in her expression. Not the usual apologetic surrender I'd come to expect, but something harder. Determined. It's wrong, she said firmly. What he's done, what he's always done, it's wrong. And I've been wrong to let it happen. I stared at her, almost unable to process her words. Never had I heard my mother openly criticize Dad's decisions, let alone call them wrong. I should have protected you more, she continued, voice growing stronger. I should have made sure you were treated fairly. I failed you, Olivia, and I'm so sorry. The apology, unexpected and sincere, cracked something in me. I'd been so focused on Dad's betrayal that I hadn't fully processed Mom's role in it all, or what her support might mean now. It's not too late, I said, an idea forming. You could help me make this right.
How?
She looked nervous, but resolved. Your father won't replace the money. I've already asked. He claims it's gone, spent on Ryan's trip and other expenses. Then we need to expose him. I replied, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. Not just to us, but to everyone. Mom's eyes widened. What do you mean? I stood, pacing the small space of my room. The annual family dinner is next Saturday, right? Everyone will be there, Grandma, Grandpa, the aunts and uncles, everyone. Yes, but that's when we do it. We show them all exactly what Dad did, what he's been doing for years. The energy of righteous purpose filled me. We bring the evidence. The bank statements, the receipts, everything that proves he emptied my college fund for Ryan's luxuries. Mom paled. Olivia, that would be so public. Your father would be humiliated. Good, I said, beyond caring about his feelings. He should be humiliated. What he did was wrong. She didn't disagree, which gave me hope. What do you need from me? She asked after a long pause. I hadn't expected it to be this easy. I'd prepared arguments, appeals to her maternal instinct, reminders of all the times she'd failed to stand up for me. But here she was, offering her help without a fight. Everything, I said. Every receipt, every bank statement, every shred of evidence that shows the pattern. Ryan's expenses versus mine. The college fund withdrawals. All of it. Mom nodded slowly. I can get those. Your father keeps everything, even when he shouldn't. Tax records, receipts, it's all in his home office. Perfect. I felt a surge of determination. And I need you to back me up when I confront him. No more standing silent, Mom. I need you to tell the truth. She hesitated only briefly before nodding again. I will. It's time. For the next week, we gathered evidence like detectives building a case. Mom smuggled financial documents from Dad's office while I collected screenshots of Ryan's social media posts, the ones where he bragged about his epic Florida trip, his new gaming setup, the designer clothes. Look at this, Mom said one afternoon, passing me a stack of papers. College tuition payments for Ryan. 3 semesters, all paid in full. I skimmed the documents, noting the amounts. Over $30,000. Meanwhile, I have a depleted college fund and a weekend job shelving books. And this, she added, handing me another folder. Your brother's credit card bills. Your father pays them every month, no questions asked. The unfairness of it all hit me anew with each discovery. It wasn't just my college fund. It was years of systematic favoritism, documented in black and white. Do you think it will be enough? Mom asked the night before the family dinner, looking at the evidence we'd organized into a comprehensive presentation. I nodded, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. More than enough. As I packed our evidence into my backpack, I thought about what tomorrow would bring. The shock on my grandparents' faces. The judgment from the aunts and uncles. Ryan's disbelief when he realized his privileges had come at my expense. And my father, forced to finally face the consequences of his choices. For years, I'd been invisible in my own family. Tomorrow they would all see me crystal clear. Grandma Wilson's house always smelled like cinnamon and old books, a comforting combination that usually made me feel safe. Tonight, however, my stomach twisted with nervous anticipation as we pulled into the driveway, already lined with family cars. Are you sure about this? Mom whispered as Dad killed the engine. Her eyes darted to my backpack, heavy with evidence. I nodded, heart hammering against my ribs. Absolutely. Dad had been suspiciously pleasant all day, as if determined to present the picture of a happy family to his relatives. Ryan rode shotgun, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm about to break over his privileged head. Best behavior tonight, Dad reminded us as we approached the front door. No family drama. The irony of his words almost made me laugh. Little did he know that family drama was exactly what I had packed meticulously into my backpack. Grandma opened the door before we could knock, her face lighting up at the sight of us. "There you all are.
Come in, come in."
Everyone's already here. The dining room buzzed with conversation. Aunt Meredith and Uncle Phil were debating politics while their kids played on tablets. Cousin Emma was showing off her engagement ring to anyone who would look. Grandpa snored softly in his armchair, waking occasionally to add a comment before drifting off again. Normal. Ordinary. Exactly the kind of family gathering where hard truths were usually buried beneath polite small talk and shared desserts. Not tonight. "Ryan," Aunt Meredith exclaimed, pulling my brother into a hug. "Tell us about Florida. Your mom says you had the most amazing time." Ryan launched into his practice stories, the ones he'd been polishing for weeks. The jet skiing adventure, the beach party where he met a model, the luxury of the all-inclusive resort. "Sounds expensive," Uncle Phil commented, eyebrows raised. "Times must not be as tough as you were saying, Trevor." Dad laughed nervously. "You know how it is. You make sacrifices for the important things." The casual comment sent a wave of anger through me. Sacrifices. As if the only sacrifice hadn't been my future. "Dinner's ready," Grandma called, saving Dad from elaborating. Everyone to the table. I placed my backpack carefully by my chair as we all took our seats around Grandma's massive dining table. Crystal glasses and polished silver reflected the chandelier light. Grandma always went all out for family dinners. The meal began normally enough. Plates were passed, compliments given to the chef, wine poured for the adults. I barely touched my food, rehearsing my speech in my head, waiting for the right moment. It came sooner than expected. "So, Olivia," Grandma said, turning her attention to me. "Your father tells me you're looking at colleges. Have you decided where you're applying?" The table quieted, all eyes turning to me. Dad's gaze carried a warning, but I ignored it. "Actually, Grandma, I wanted to talk about that," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been researching scholarships since Dad told me I'd be paying my own way." Dad cleared his throat. "Olivia." But then I discovered something interesting. I continued, reaching for my backpack. "Something about the college fund you and Grandpa set up for me when I was born." Confusion crossed Grandma's face. "The trust fund? What about it?" "Yes, Trevor," Grandpa suddenly chimed in, fully awake now. "What about Olivia's trust fund? Last I checked, it had over $10,000. The table fell silent. Dad's face paled slightly as all eyes turned to him. "I have something to say," I announced, standing up and pulling out the stack of papers from my backpack. Mom gave me an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "What's going on?" Ryan asked, looking between Dad and me with growing confusion. I laid out the bank statements on the table where everyone could see them. "These are the records of my college fund, the one Grandma and Grandpa started for me," I explained, voice clear in the hushed room. 3 months ago, it had almost $12,000. Now it has barely $3,000. Aunt Meredith gasped. Uncle Phil leaned forward, studying the papers with a frown. "That can't be right," Grandma said, reaching for the statements. "It is right," I countered. "And the withdrawals all match up perfectly with Ryan's expenses. His Florida trip, his new laptop, his designer clothes." "What?" Ryan's voice cracked in genuine shock. "Dad, is that true?" Dad's face had turned from pale to red. "This is a family matter that doesn't need to be discussed at dinner." "This is exactly where it needs to be discussed," I interrupted, my confidence growing with each word. "Because it's not just my college fund. It's years of you favoring Ryan over me." I pulled out more evidence. The tuition payments for Ryan, the credit card statements, the receipts for his extravagant birthday gifts over the years compared to my forgotten celebrations. "Olivia," Dad hissed, "stop this right now." "No," I replied firmly. "You told me to stop crying when you canceled my birthday for Ryan's vacation. You said it wasn't a big deal. Well, this is a big deal." Ryan laughed nervously. "Come on, you're making a scene over some money? It's not that serious." "It is serious," Mom interjected, her quiet voice silencing the table. Trevor has been systematically favoring Ryan at Olivia's expense for years, and I've allowed it to happen. The admission hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Is this true? Grandma asked, turning to Dad with an expression I'd never seen before, cold disappointment replacing her usual warmth. Dad scrambled for excuses. Mom, you don't understand. Ryan needed those things for his social development. Olivia's always been more independent, more what? Grandpa interrupted, his voice like steel. More willing to be overlooked? More willing to have her future stolen? I raised these kids, Dad snapped, desperation edging his voice. I get to decide what's best for them. You stole from your own daughter? Grandma's voice was cold, cutting through Dad's defense. The conversation halted as all eyes turned to her. For the first time in my life, I saw my father shrink under someone's gaze. The confident, domineering man who ruled our household looked small and pathetic under Grandma's withering stare. Claire, he appealed to Mom. Tell them this is being blown out of proportion. Mom shook her head slowly. No, Trevor. I've stayed silent too long. What you did was wrong. Ryan stared at the bank statements, the reality of his privilege finally sinking in. Dad, you said you were paying for my stuff from your bonus. He lied, I said simply. He's been lying to all of us. The family dinner had dissolved into exactly what Dad had feared: public exposure of his favoritism, his theft, his betrayal. As relatives murmured in shock and disappointment, as Grandma conferred quietly with Grandpa, as Ryan tried to process that his charmed life had come at my expense, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time, everyone saw the truth. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. The reckoning had only just begun. The shockwaves from that family dinner rippled through our lives for months. Dad's carefully constructed image as the perfect father shattered that night, leaving behind the truth everyone now saw clearly: a man who had sacrificed one child's future for another's comfort. The drive home had been silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Ryan stared out the window, uncharacteristically quiet. Dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mom kept glancing back at me with a mix of worry and pride. I expected rage when we got home, shouting, punishment, threats. Instead, Dad retreated to his study without a word, locking the door behind him. The house felt different, as if the very walls were adjusting to this new reality, where secrets lived in the open. 2 days later, Mom found me in my room, studying for a calculus test as if my world hadn't just been upended. Your grandmother called, she said, sitting beside me on the bed. She wants to see you. Alone. Grandma's house looked the same as it had on the night of the dinner, but something had changed. Maybe it was the way she hugged me tighter than usual, or how her eyes shimmered with a mix of sadness and determination. I've opened a new account for you, she announced as we sat in her sunroom, tea cooling between us. Your grandfather and I have transferred funds directly to it. Your father has no access. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was documentation for a college fund with my name, only my name, listed as beneficiary. The balance, $25,000. Grandma, I breathed, unable to find more words. It's what we'd been saving for you all along, she explained, her voice gentle but firm. We just made the mistake of trusting your father to manage it. The money was more than I'd ever expected, enough to make a real difference in my college plans. But even more valuable was what came next. We've also taken legal steps, Grandma continued, to recover what was taken from your original fund. Your mother provided the documentation we needed. Mom had chosen a side at last, mine. The legal process was complicated and messy. Dad hired a lawyer, claiming parental rights to the funds. Mom countered with her own attorney, using the evidence we'd gathered to show his deliberate misappropriation. The family court judge was unimpressed with Dad's arguments about parental discretion. These funds were clearly designated for the child's education, the judge had ruled, not for luxuries for another family member. Dad was ordered to repay the full amount he'd taken with interest. The victory felt hollow and sweet all at once. Back home, The dynamics had shifted permanently. Mom moved into the guest room, divorce papers sitting on her nightstand, waiting to be filed. Ryan, confronted with the reality of his privileged existence, oscillated between defensive anger and uncomfortable guilt. "I didn't know," he kept saying, as if that absolved him. "I didn't know the money was yours. Would it have mattered if you did?" I asked him once, genuinely curious. His hesitation was answer enough. The real shock came 3 weeks after the court ruling. I was helping Mom sort through her finances for the impending divorce when Grandma called, her voice clipped with anger. "Ryan's here," she said, asking for money. Apparently, Dad had finally cut off Ryan's unlimited funding, telling him to figure it out, like I had been doing for years. Unable to access my money anymore, Ryan had turned to Grandma, spinning a tale about needing help with college expenses. "Since you wasted your sister's future, you can figure out your own," Grandma had told him, shutting the door on his stunned face. For the first time in his life, Ryan faced the consequences of his entitlement. His friends, the ones who had enjoyed the Florida trip funded by my college money, gradually drifted away when he could no longer keep up with their lifestyle. His girlfriend broke up with him when he couldn't take her to expensive restaurants anymore. "This is so unfair," he complained one night at dinner, the irony of his words completely lost on him. "How am I supposed to manage?" "Get a job," I suggested, the same advice Dad had been giving me for years. "Budget. Apply for scholarships. You know, all the things I've been doing while you were living it up on my dime." By the time graduation rolled around, our family had been permanently reconfigured. Mom filed for divorce, moving us into a modest apartment where the bills were paid on time and the atmosphere was peaceful. Dad remained in the house, alone with his pride and his favorite son, who had moved back home after failing his first semester at college. I received acceptance letters from 3 universities, each offering partial scholarships. With Grandma's fund and the recovered money, I could attend any of them without crushing debt. The sweet revenge wasn't just financial, though. It was the way Dad's face fell when I announced my acceptance to Stanford at the graduation ceremony. It was the quiet pride in Mom's eyes as she helped me pack for college. It was the knowledge that I had won by refusing to remain invisible. 5 years later, I graduated with honors, already accepted into a prestigious graduate program. Mom and Grandma sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. That evening, as we celebrated at dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I nearly dropped it when I read the message. "Congratulations on graduating. I'm proud of you. I could use some help with bills if you can spare it. Things have been tough. Dad." I stared at the screen, a strange calm washing over me. The man who had once told me to stop crying over a canceled birthday now wanted financial help from the daughter whose future he had tried to steal. I didn't even answer. He had already taught me the value of money. And he wasn't worth a cent.